Hello, it's Deborah from the attic, and today I want to show you some journals. These are a combination of traveller's notebook size journals and one full size A4, and these have been handmade, and I'm going to show you how to do it and how you can use pieces of paper on the inside to decorate your notebook so that they match your cover on the outside as well. This is my A5 journaling book, and I'm going to show you in a future video how I made this because it's slightly larger, and I'll show you how to match up the papers and make sure that you get a cover the right size, and how you can use the same paper from the spine on the inside and then add these little bits of detailing as well. But in this video, we're going to concentrate on this size. This is a traditional traveler's notebook size. This is one that I've made for myself again, and I have 3 little inserts there. You could make these yourselves, but I've chosen to buy these. I buy them in packs of 3. I just go on Amazon, I have a look for them, and just buy them and add them to my journal. Making a journal cover is actually very simple, and if I take out these inserts, you can see how simple it's going to be to make this. It's just a shape. We just have to make sure we get the right shape, and we put the little holes for the elastic in the right place, and then we can create our own journal covers using any paper that we choose. I'm going to begin by sharing the dimensions that I've used. Now, my dimensions are in centimetres and millimetres because that's what I understand, and I don't always get on very well with inches and quarter inches and bits of inches. So our dimensions are 263 millimetres by 222 millimetres. This is a piece of kraft text card, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Just now, I want to concentrate on this piece of paper. It's a very old piece of paper, 12 by 12, which I've had in my stash for a long time. I also have a spray mist bottle. This has got water in it and also about 20% of glycerin. Mix this together and then spray it onto your paper. I'm only going to give this a very, very light spray because it's a thin paper. It doesn't need very much help to bend and soften, and I'm going to pat the glycerin water mix into it. It prevents your paper, or if you're using card, from developing cracks. Kraft text is a paper material that acts almost like leather. It's very difficult to rip, and it can be washed or painted or stained, making it very adaptable for all sorts of craft projects. I'm going to go with the natural curve of my kraft text as it came in the roll, and I'm going to use matte Mod Podge as my glue. I should point out that the piece of kraft text that I've cut is actually larger than the dimensions that I mentioned earlier, so it's larger than 263 by 222 millimeters. I've taken my piece of paper and I'm just going to spread that over the top of my generously glued piece of kraft text underneath. I'm just going to spread this out and make sure it gets really good adhesion, especially on those edges. I will explain later on why I've chosen to use a piece that is larger than we actually need. I'm going to cut off the excess, and that wider piece, the first piece that I've cut off, I'm going to reserve that because I may well use that to decorate the inside of my journal. Now I'm going to take my Mod Podge again. I'm going to add another generous layer all over the front cover, and this will act as a sealant, and it will protect my journal and it will protect that rather thin paper. I'm going to set this aside to dry. I left this for about half an hour or so to dry off, and you can see it has a lovely sheen without being glossy. To really make sure it's protected, I'm going to add a second layer of Mod Podge. The reason that I've used a larger piece of kraft text and paper than we actually need is because I found this was the most effective way to make sure that you get a really good seal around the edges. And since I'm going to be leaving this to one side to dry, I may as well add some Mod Podge to that extra little strip of paper that I had, and then if I do choose to use it in the future, I don't have to wait for that to dry as well, because I'm very, very impatient. And once again, I've left this for half an hour and it's completely dry. The next stage then is to cut this down to size. I'm going to start by giving myself a really clean edge to draw all the rest of my measurements from. And I use a metal ruler that has a protective area for your fingers and a scalpel. Draw the scalpel down across the top of all of your layers very gently. You don't need to apply force, just keep repeating the action of drawing the scalpel down and it will cut cleanly. Now that I have that sharp edge, I can use that as the point from which to make all of my measurements for my book. I've made myself a template because I hate measuring things out and I like to make life simple. My template is cut to exactly the right dimensions that I need, and therefore all I need to do is draw around the outside. I've got a pencil line now, and I'll line up my metal ruler against those pencil lines and cut through them with my scalpel. We have a small amount of measuring to do now to help us get the holes for the elastic in the right place. Measure into the centre. Now I happen to know that that's 131 millimeters because I've done this a couple of times now. So measure to that point, top and bottom of your booklet, and join those lines. Then you have a reliable centre point. Now you want to take your ruler and measure 8 millimeters in from that centre line to the right hand side, and then do the same to the left hand side. I've turned my journal on its side now so that I can measure in from the edge 8 millimeters. And where those lines intersect is where I know I need to put the 3 holes to put the elastics. I'm going to make this a little simpler by drawing this out. So measure to halfway, 131 millimeters into the center, then measure 8 millimeters either side of your center line. Do that at the top and the bottom of your journal. And when you've got your holes marked in place, you'll be ready to poke the holes through. I've got a couple of ways that you can do this. The first way, making sure you protect your table underneath, is with a pokey tool. I have a screw punch and I got this from a lovely website called Beyond Measure, and I'll provide a link to it below. This is a fantastic tool, and the only reason I have this is because I make quite a lot of these sorts of booklets. It's brilliant. You press it down, it turns, it cuts a hole, and it cuts a beautifully perfect sized hole. It's a great gizmo, but it's only worth investing in if it's something you'll use an awful lot. Otherwise, the pokey tool is fine. I used it for years and made many journals. Now I'm measuring into the center of the book. I'm going to add the final little hole. You can see how strong that punch is, the way it turns that kraft text. And that's my final hole ready to put the elastic through. And before I do that, I'm going to make sure that the seal is good all the way around the edges of my journal. And if you want to be really certain, you could always take a little line of stitching around that outside edge to make absolutely sure. I'm going to complete this by snipping off the corners, and that will stop them getting a little bit rag-eared. Next, I'm going to show you how to thread the elastic into your journal pages. I'm also going to make this available as a standalone video so that for ease of reference, you know to come back and look for the video that will say something like threading elastic into your journals. I'm using a 2mm thick white elastic. Again, I found this online on Amazon, and you want 4 lengths worth. So 4 lengths of the width of your book. If you've made any marks on the inside, this is a good time to use an eraser and remove them. We start with the center hole, and working from front to back, we take a length of the elastic and thread it through to the top center hole, then bring it into the hole above the center hole. Leave a little tail of elastic slightly more than halfway into the center of your journal. Pull a little tension on that center piece, and then going back to the right hand side, working from front to back, thread another length through to the left hand side. This time you're going to bring the elastic end in through the center hole. This is where you will have 2 pieces of elastic going in and out of the same hole. So we poke it through. It can be a little bit fiddly, but we poke it through and pull it down all the way to the bottom, to the right hand center hole, I should say. You want to make sure there's a little tension on those lengths of elastic, but not so much that it will badly bend your book. Now take the piece of elastic through the bottom hole in the center and pop it up through the hole above that. Draw it into the middle and then make a knot, the sort of knot where you go right over left and left over right. I don't know if it has a special name, I just know that it stops your elastic coming undone. And then snip the edges off that you don't need. Now there will be a longer piece of elastic, and this is the one that we're going to use for that center hole. Check the tension at this point because you don't want your book to be too bent, but at the same time you want the elastic to be under a tiny little bit of tension. Fold the final piece of elastic in half and then poke the loop from back to front through the center hole. Make sure there's enough to reach around to the edge of your page, and then do the same knot right over left and left over right, and cut away any excess. Now you can fold your journal cover in half and make sure that your securing loop actually does reach round. This is a good time to make adjustments if necessary. And once you're happy with everything, you can add your inserts and your journal is complete. I hope you found this video useful. I hope you will give this a try. I hope I've made it look as simple as it actually is. And until we meet again, take care.